Welcome to Hyperfixation Investigations, the podcast where two neurospicy best friends take time twice a month to infodump their research deep dive of the week.
Lovingly produced and copyrighted by Wolf and Stag Productions.
Today's fun fact is, George Lucas originally wanted Orson Welles as the voice of Darth Vader, but dropped the idea when he thought that Welles' famous baritone would be too recognizable.
Good morning, I'm Josh, and I'll be captaining this week's episode, Fall of the Jedi, Hubris and Other Fatal Flaws, part 1 of our non-consecutive miniseries, The Force and the Final Frontier.
Good evening, I'm Kara, and I'm just along for the ride. For those of you joining us for the first time, how things work here is Josh will be leading us through a mini lecture on the topic, and we will discuss throughout the episode.
Expect tangents throughout. We switch off duties each episode, so next time expect Kara to take the helm.
Now to our regularly scheduled program. Josh, what have you been hyperfixating on this week?
Well, Kara, as you know, I love Star Wars with all my heart. And therefore, I always have some portion of my brain devoted to thinking about the fall of the Jedi and the destruction of the Galactic Republic.
Right.
So that's generally what I'll be infodumping about today.
Oh, great. It'll be like coffee time on Saturdays.
Yeah, hey. Fair. Before we get into it, though, I do want to quickly nip something in the bud.
Oh my gosh, okay.
Because I feel the need to call out the fact that there is a weirdly large amount of the fandom online that makes interacting with the fandom online insufferable.
Okay. I've never tried it, but I'll take your word for it.
You know what? That's kind of for the best, unless you're willing to go through the trenches.
Probably not.
Because there's a ton of people who they love to be weird about it.
Oh, good.
And like over the last few years especially, it's been increasingly popular to see people online keep saying, Star Wars isn't political, bro. Get over it.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
It's inherently political.
Yes. Not only is all art inherently political.
Yeah, true.
Because no artist can or should completely divorce their lived experiences from the beliefs and the art they produce. And no team of creators has ever made emotionally moving and beautiful art completely devoid of context from the world around them.
Right. It's literally about somebody overthrowing an empire.
Yes!
How is that not political?
Right. Also, the name? Star Wars?
Wars. Right.
Wars.
Wars are also inherently political.
Right. I don't know anything that's not that's like non-political about a war.
Right.
And explicitly a war that is about the people rising up against a tyrannical and corrupt government.
Which, we could use a little bit of right now. I'm just saying.
There are many ways in which I have issues with George Lucas, but this is not one of them.
Right.
Also, fun fact, George Lucas, the original creator of Star Wars, stated in the 2004 DVD re-release audio commentary for Return of the Jedi that he included the Ewoks in Episode 6 specifically as a stand-in for the Viet Cong.
Oh, good.
Yes. And he later reiterated that when talking with James Cameron for James Cameron's story of science fiction on AMC, stating that, the inspiration for the rebellion was always events such as the American War for Independence and the Vietnam War, where huge military powers end up losing against a small ragtag groups of
guerrilla warfare.
Right.
Yeah.
And more than anything, I kind of hate feeling the need to even say any of this because I don't even want those people who say Star Wars isn't political to ever think for a second that they have a legitimate leg to stand on or argument worth engaging with.
Right.
Because 99% of the time, the people saying those things either have no idea what they're talking about, or more likely, they're just weird bigots and incels who are mad that women, queer people, and people of color get any screen time at all, and especially the more modern Star Wars project.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
By the way, I always recommend the High Republic novels.
Okay.
Partly because there are way more queer characters and characters of color than there are in the films or TV shows, for the most part.
Who writes the books?
Because
I'm sure it's not George Lucas.
Gods, no. No, they have a team of people writing the books.
Oh, cool.
And the comics as well. And I don't remember all of their names off the top of my head.
It's not George Lucas.
No. So a lot of social stuff is handled better for modern audiences.
Yep.
They were also only starting to be released as of, I think, 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh, so they're pretty modern.
So they're quite new.
Yeah. So, Josh, I have a question for you.
Oh, gods, yes.
Is this going to be one of your soapbox episodes? We haven't had one yet.
A little bit, yeah.
Very nice.
A little bit.
So we've always talked about having a mini series that in and of itself is just things that we need to rant about.
Mm-hmm.
Various soapbox topics have been added to our episode list over the years?
I think this is going to be halfway into one.
Cool.
Because there's going to be moments of soapbox where you can see him just, okay, hang on, I got to get out for 5 minutes here. All right. And now we're back. So.
Yes.
Yes and no.
Nice.
Anywho, with that out of the way, if you're not a Star Wars super fan, which a lot of people are not, fear not. I will try to keep things making sense without getting too bogged down in the thick of things, but it is Star Wars, so there's going to be some weird jargon, and I'll try to keep it all accessible for non-fans.
So anybody who watches Doctor Who, or even if you haven't watched Doctor Who, there's the long-standing theory, and it's been approved by writers and creators for Doctor Who too, that the companions in Doctor Who exist to help the viewer make sense of all the stuff that's going on in Doctor Who and ask all the questions because, you know, the Doctor knows everything essentially. And so they don't need to explain themselves. But, when they have a companion who doesn't know what's going on, they do need to explain themselves. It's very useful for the plot and for the general understanding of the story. So for this episode, folks, I'm the companion. Hi, nice to meet you. I know just enough about Star Wars to follow some of this, but I'll be helping keep him on track.
Yes.
Keeping us out of the weeds somewhat.
I thank you for that. I will need to go off the beaten path a little bit to make my point sometimes. But yes, please rein me in now and again, and I know you will. But I will also say there's going to be some spoilers for a wide variety of Star Wars stories, from books to movies to TV shows. Most of these will be for prequel era and High Republic, not too much original trilogy or sequels. And I'll try not to be too super spoilery too often, but it's going to happen a little bit here and there. So just be warned, this whole episode is going to be rife with stuff that if you really care about not hearing spoilers, there's going to be some. Yeah, I'll try to keep away from too much of like plot point spoilers for like individual stories. But broad strokes, I'm going to need to dig into some of them. All right, so a page and a half into my notes, and we're actually getting to the Jedi.
Oh my gosh!
The title of the episode. So what is the Jedi Order, and why does it eventually fall? Let's, I guess, start with the history of the Jedi and who they are, how they operate.
Okay.
A lot of my notes here are from Wikipedia.
Oh my god.
Which is the Star Wars specific fan wiki.
Yep. Good.
The Jedi Order is, quote, a noble, monastic, and non-theistic religious order united in their devotion to the light side of the Force. End quote.
Okay, I already have a question.
Yes.
How can a monastic religious order be non-theistic?
They just don't really believe in any particular, like, god or deity. Their focus is more just on a particular set of beliefs and the Force itself as a whole.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a little odd, but it's like, well, they didn't want to make him actually worship anything or one in particular. No, instead they focus on just being bastions of goodness in the galaxy and acting to help those in need anywhere they can.
Okay.
They're quite literally the fantasy and samurai trope of noble wandering knights who fight only for justice and peace. But they also fulfill the trope of wise old monks who meditate to seek spiritual clarity at the same time.
Hashtag Yoda.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Now, the Force, for anyone who's not super familiar, is, of course, the mystical power and energy of all life in the universe, which flows through all living things and can be manipulated by the Jedi and other Force-sensitive individuals in a variety of ways. To quote Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope, the Force is what gives Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, and it binds the galaxy together.
Very cool.
Jedi can use the Force to move objects, improve their reflexes, sense for danger around them, make spiritual connections with animals, which we see in several TV shows especially. There are Jedi who receive visions through the Force. There are some who have the power of psychometry through the Force. Very fun.
Yep.
And I know you know what psychometry is.
Yes, but for our friends.
Yes, for most listeners, psychometry is the ability to magically learn about an object's history by touching that object. And there are a wide variety of abilities. The abilities a Force user has is...
The Force is magic, folks.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it's all the magics.
Right. It's an ambiguous just...
It's your aura, it's your soul, it's magic.
Yeah, there's...
It's dark matter.
It is
kind of everything.
A soft magic system where there's no math involved with the Force.
Right.
It's just kind of, it's all drama and narrative and emotional payoff, and what a Jedi can or can't do largely depends on just what the narrative needs them to be capable of.
Yep.
And so the Force adapts for that.
Yeah.
I do also really love that the High Republic novels do a great job of showing how unique the Force is to each Jedi. They each experience the Force in their own way. Mm-hmm. So Jedi Master Avar Kriss hears the Force as a song, a sort of cosmic symphony.
Yeah. Which we see that kind of individualism in a lot of representations of witchcraft and fantasy and other kinds of powers in sci-fi.
Which I think the High Republic is really the first place we see that in Star Wars as much. But I really enjoy that kind of individualization of this thing that is ever present.
Right.
And helps reinforce that, yeah, they're not really changing or manipulating the Force so much as letting the Force work through them.
Yeah.
And or working through the Force. Elzar Mann feels the Force as a vast ocean. And the Wookiee Jedi, named Buryaga Agaburi,
love it,
feels the Force as a vast forest.
So, complete side tangent.
Yes.
Not related to Star Wars at all, but
no.
that name brought it up. We go to northern Minnesota every summer, and we have to pass through these very small towns up in northern Minnesota. And depending on which way you're going, depends on the order these two towns show up on the road signs. And I've decided that either of them would be my Hobbit name.
Oh, yes.
Because the towns are Embarrass and Babbitt. So it would either be Embarrass Babbitt or Babbitt Embarrass.
That's
as a Hobbit
great name.
And it's amazing.
That is a great name. Gods. Yes. No.
Anyway, side tangent over.
the names in Lord of the Rings are amazing and I love them.
Yes.
Likewise, the names in Star Wars, phenomenal and ridiculous.
Totally.
I mean, Darth Maul's brother is named Savage Opress. Literally spelled Savage Opress.
Good.
And he's voiced by Clancy Brown.
Nice. Nice.
Right. But then you get like Bel Zettifar. Like just, that is a great name. Anywho. Various Star Wars stories have since stated that there are both a living force and a cosmic force, which is, it's really two sides of the same coin. It's the same one energy, but the living force is the energy of all living things, plants, animals, peoples. And when anyone or anything dies, they are said to become one with the Force. Mm-hmm. And what literally is happening is their life energy becomes part of the cosmic force, which is more of the kind of ever-present aura force throughout the galaxy.
If anybody's ever learned anything about the Akashic Records, that's going to make a lot of sense to you.
Yeah, there's... Star Wars pulls from mythology and religion throughout the world and throughout history.
Yeah, so it's like you die and you join the collective.
Yeah. Now, there is also a light side.
Sorry.
There is also a light side and a dark side of the Force, of course.
Of course.
Remember, this is a story about good versus evil.
Yeah.
The bad guys are almost always those who fell to the temptation of the dark side, while the heroes are bastions of the light.
Rude. The darkness is not inherently evil. Rude.
Right. Well, it's all big, broad allegory, melodrama stuff. So, but of course, sometimes heroes are briefly tempted by the darkness, but typically grow as heroes as a result of their brush with evil.
Yes.
The Jedi, of course, seek to uphold the light, acting for the betterment of others whenever and wherever possible. During the High Republic era of Star Wars, which, by the way, is roughly a couple hundred years before the main movie trilogies.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think like Anakin and Han Solo and those characters are not involved yet.
Right. No.
Yeah.
This is like 200 to 350 years ago. But at that time, a common phrase and rallying cry among the Jedi was, "For light and life."
Very nice.
Which is simultaneously a battle cry and a mission statement, right?
Yeah.
And of course, with a light side, there must also be a dark side.
Obviously.
Which is where we get the Sith Order, which is the primary enemy organization of, dark side wielders. I will say there are plenty of other factions, orders, cults that use the Force in both light and dark ways.
Okay.
It's not just Jedi versus Sith. Those are just the two we generally focus on.
Right.
Because they're particularly bitter rivals. And I'll get a little bit more into the Sith. their history and as an antagonistic force later on.
Okay.
But some of the other Force-based orders,
Mm-hmm.
there's the Church of the Force, the Guardians of the Wills, the Dagoyan Order, the Brotherhood of the Ninth Door. My personal favorite...
This is so very Doctor Who in my own brain.
My personal favorite are the Night Sisters, a.k.a. the Witches of Dathomir.
I like this one.
Hey, when they get involved with the Force, shit gets weird. And, like, mystical weird.
I love it.
Honorable mention, of course, to the Path of the Open Hand. The Jedi Order has existed for at least around 25,000 years.
Wow.
Yes.
A long time.
They've operated at and through various temples throughout the known galaxy, collecting Force-sensitive children to join their order.
I'm sorry, did you say collecting?
With the consent of their parents. I mean,
okay.
there are a few planets who still take issue with it, and so, they don't really talk too often.
Participate, right?
But, yeah, generally it's, a Force-sensitive child, like a toddler.
Right.
A Jedi will show up to the door and go, hey.
Well, you can't be the hero if you're not an orphan.
Exactly. So they created an order of orphans.
Of orphans. Good. That's never going to bite you in the ass.
No, it's fine. I mean, most of them are fine with it because it's all they've known.
Right.
But these children eventually are trained as initiates or younglings until eventually their training is taken on by a master. And once tutelage begins in earnest, they become a Padawan, which is
yes.
basically just a squire traveling with a knight, right?
Okay.
Until such time as they're deemed ready to take on the Jedi trial, which each trial...
The Kabarashi Maru.
God. Basically. The trials are different for most Jedi, but how they respond to the challenge and whether or not they succeed determines whether or not they are knighted.
Okay.
And then Jedi Knights are the majority of the Order, kind of acting as independent agents that serve the will of the Jedi High Council, which is the ruling body of the Jedi Order. And of course, through determination, dedication, and demonstration of mastery through the Force and mastery of themselves, they earn the rank of Jedi Master. The Jedi Code is a series of teachings, rules, guidelines. The Code teaches selflessness, compassion, avoiding anger towards other living beings, partly because anger and fear are deeply tied, and both things can lead down the path of the dark side.
Right, makes sense.
The Code also teaches non-attachment, which is a little...
So we're going very monk.
Well, and it can be a little contradictory to also compassion, or at least depending on...
I think monks and nuns would probably argue with you on that one.
No, I would agree. No, see, here's the thing. I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
But there are occasional Jedi who have issues when they struggle with emotional attachment and what that means. So, and we'll get into that in a minute.
Okay.
But there is specifically a mantra that the fandom often refers to the mantra as the Code because it's the part we have, but it's really just a segment of it that we, as the audience, are aware of. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force.
I have arguments.
Yes. Yes.
Peace, like, as a state of being, emotions are states of being. So how... Okay, so there's that.
Yes.
Second, harmonies. Whereas mathematic, harmony can also be inherently chaotic. So, no.
Yeah. The mantra is not perfect. It's an oversimplification that is meant to be the distillation of several parts of the overall code.
Huh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Anybody thinking 10 Commandments here?
Yeah, honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's also more aspirational than it is finite or definitive. Teaching that serenity is to be sought in times of emotional distress so that cooler heads may prevail.
Okay, sure.
Do not act in ignorance, but rather seek to understand before you act.
You need to know what you don't know.
Right. Chaos is often used by people trying to take advantage of others, so...
I would never.
I didn't accuse you.
What?
So always working towards achieving harmony between others and oneself in, in many ways.
Yeah.
It's not pure harmonious intent all the time, but like trying to... The journey is important itself.
Sure.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that death is not destruction. but rather the return of oneself to the cosmic force.
That I do like.
Right.
Yes.
That it's, it's gone but not forgotten.
And also no point in fearing anything that's inevitable.
Yes. However, as we've already mentioned, for thousands of years, there have been a few Jedi here and there that have struggled with these parts of the code, specifically because the Jedi teach that all life is precious, the importance of compassion, but also that emotional attachment is dangerous and to be avoided, specifically because attachment can be exploited by means of fear of loss.
Sure.
Which can then evoke fear and anger, and of course being stepping stones to the dark side. Acting out of fear and anger often leads people to do horrible things.
What?
Especially when you have tremendous power. So, one of the things I appreciate about the High Republic novels is that there are several characters who grapple with this conflict of what it means to be emotionally connected to others around them, like care for others, while also trying not to get so emotionally attached that they can be manipulated to do terrible things. And of those, multiple people do come to similar conclusions that the dogmatic and strict adherence to avoiding love as a blanket rule is a bad idea and not what the Jedi should strive for.
Right.
But rather that this teaching is best interpreted to mean that one must not let their emotions rule them.
Sure. Or
Right.
like the acceptance of loss and grief and not fighting against the fact that that's also an inevitable emotion to feel if you care about people.
Right. You have to feel and process your emotions, not just ignore or hide them or feel shame about anything, because that's just going to lead you to anger and, that a lot of that anger is going to be directed towards yourself.
Right.
You're going to misplace it to others around you, too. The idea is care and love for those around you should always be driving you towards doing and being better.
Sure.
But that just don't let your emotions control you. Don't let your fear and anxieties get the better of you.
Right. This feels like a very timely episode.
There's something about this that's always a little timely.
True.
Right now
right
is
now,
particularly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, this is also why I specifically love Jedi Knight Kanan Jarrus from the Rebels TV show.
Okay.
And why I will happily take the stance that Kanan, his character arc leads him to become one of the best Jedi of the modern era.
Wow.
Because it takes place between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope.
Okay.
As he grows, he very well embodies this ideal that love and compassion are central to the Jedi. But specifically, late in the show, there is a moment when his romantic partner, because yes, he is effectively married, is in serious danger, and he turns to his apprentice to lead the rescue mission, specifically stating, quote, "I can't think clearly because of the way I feel about her. I might make a mistake, one that could cost us." So he hands over the reins to his Padawan, who he trusts. He knows, I've trained you. You will be the best person to lead this mission.
Right.
Tell me what to do, and I'll do it. Because
Yeah.
I don't want to let my emotions get in the way of what needs to be done here.
See, that's self-understanding and wisdom.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Also, bonus points, he's voiced by Freddie Prinze Jr.
Yes.
Phenomenal.
We love.
Now, the problem for the Jedi Order is that this nuanced understanding of the code is not the norm.
Oh, good.
And in fact, by the time of the prequel trilogy, that dogma is front and center in how the Jedi behave.
Yeah, it causes some problems, doesn't it?
Yeah, so it leads to people like Anakin Skywalker, who feels the need to hide his emotions, which ultimately causes unhealthy behaviors and habits to fester because he has nothing but fear that he will lose the relationships he has developed. Right? His secret wife, Padme. His master, Obi-Wan, who he considers a brother.
Right.
His Padawan, Ahsoka, who looks up to him as a brother.
Right.
And also, side note, it's generally agreed in the fandom that it's kind of an open secret that he and Padme are a thing.
Okay.
Yeah, they're a little too close for most Jedi's comfort, but because nobody really comments on it, it is generally understood that, yeah, people probably know or are aware, they're too close, but their marriage was probably a genuine secret.
Okay.
And now, what do you think Yoda says when Anakin comes to him finally, going, "Hey, I'm having visions of people I care about dying, and it's scaring me"?
Don't worry about it.
Kinda. What Yoda says is, "You must let go of all that you fear to lose." Which, I see why
Right.
he's getting there, but no, we got to process these emotions first. We got to work through them.
And be like, it's valid to feel that way.
Right, your
You just
emotions
need
are
to work
valid.
through it.
So naturally, Anakin's fear of loss and his lack of self-actualization makes him a prime target for manipulation by the Sith Lord Darth Sidious, who was hiding in plain sight, of course, as Chancellor Palpatine. And most of the Jedi hardly really took notice.
I'm sorry, I never realized his name was Darth Sidious.
Sidious? Yes. Yeah, again.
Insidious, and he's hiding. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Insidious. Mm-hmm. Darth Sidious.
Yep.
Star Wars names.
We love it.
I mean, the whole order generally needs an in-house therapist.
Oh, yeah.
To help them work through what it looks like to have healthy emotional connections to others and how to say goodbye to dead loved ones in an even halfway healthy manner. But Anakin is really like the narrative allegory for how emotionally immature young men with no real tools for healthily dealing with their emotions can be manipulated by power-hungry individuals in positions of authority who offer them answers, comfort, and guidance in all the wrong fucking ways. Sorry, in all the wrong criffing ways. And for all the wrong reasons, turning their insecurities into a cycle of self-loathing that can be used to further manipulate and provoke into terrible actions.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
School shooters where?
Toxic manosphere bullshit where? For Anakin, that means being manipulated into being cruel and capricious when, with the stated intention of winning a war, protecting his wife.
Right.
But just ends up, in his fear and rage, killing her and dooming the Republic. So, ultimately, this lack of ability of the Jedi Order to actually deal with emotions, and especially emotions of clearly troubled individuals in their ranks, is one of many reasons that they are able to be almost completely destroyed when Darth Sidious emerges from the shadows. They create an environment greatly lacking in proper emotional regulation. Mm-hmm. It made Palpatine's job of choosing a protege that much easier.
Right.
Actually, if we're talking about Palpatine, I should probably talk about the Sith Order a little bit.
Okay.
Because they're the oldest enemy of the Jedi. Ultimately, Palpatine, a member of the Sith Order, is the one who destroys most of the Jedi and ends up, establishing a fascist empire. Which, by the way, it should be so obvious that the Empire in the original trilogy is they're evoking Nazi vibes. Right. Like that was the point of those uniforms.
Please tell us you know that.
Yes. It's important to me you know that.
It's important that you know that.
I think now might be the most reasonable place to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the Sith.
Okay.
Alrighty, let's take a second to enjoy the break here in hyperspace while we make our way to the next planet on our journey. Maybe bet your ship on a game of Sabacc while we have a moment.
We're excited to let you all know that we're now streaming our episodes on YouTube. You can find all our prior episodes already up and ready to go for you, and new episodes will update just like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. For those who appreciate social media updates and episode reminders, please follow us on YouTube at Hyperfixation Investigations Podcast or Blue Sky at Hi-Podcast. Again, that's at HI-Podcast. Or sign up for our email list at our website to ensure you never miss a thing.
And please, leave a comment or review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or even on our website. We love to hear from you, and it helps us a lot. If you would like to contribute to us directly and help us continue growing, consider subscribing to our podcast on Patreon. Also, for those visual learners or folks with any kind of hearing impairment or audio processing disorder, we now have episode transcripts available on our website, as well as Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Spotify is out of our control, unfortunately, so we just have to wait for them to add that ability for all creators. All right, I suppose now let's get back into the episode. All right, so the origins of the Sith Order actually comes in the form of a fallen Jedi.
I'm shocked.
Oh yeah, tens of thousands of years ago.
Okay.
So there was a rogue Jedi whose name has been lost to time. Somebody became power-hungry, greedy, and they were banished from the Jedi Order because of their clear lust for power.
Okay.
But they managed to gather followers and establish an organization antithetical to the Jedi. Mm-hmm. The Sith seek power above all else. They are driven by selfish and single-minded hate, anger, and greed. Naturally, Palpatine became a politician.
Naturally.
They were eventually mostly killed off. But throughout their tens of thousands of years of history, the biggest problem the Sith faced, which prevented them from destroying the Jedi, was always each other.
Oh, they're too busy in-house fighting.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. They were always stabbing each other in the back. It shouldn't be surprising how much they hate each other and themselves.
Right.
The Sith Code, which is a bastardization of the Jedi Code, rejects the notion of peace and encourages selfishness, cruelty, and a lust for power. So, for reference, the Sith Code is peace is a lie, there is only passion. Through passion I gain strength. Through strength I gain power. Through power I gain victory. Through victory my chains are broken. The Force shall free me.
Interesting.
Yes. Fun little side note about the Sith Code. The Sith Code was originally written by writer and video game designer David Gator,
Okay.
who made the Sith Code as part of the 2003 Knights of the Old Republic video game.
Okay.
After he had asked somebody at Lucasfilm if the Sith had any officially written mantra, and they told him, you know what? Go ahead and write one.
Oh, good.
So he went, okay. He inverted the Jedi Code and took additional inspiration from Hitler's manifesto Mein Kampf. Yeah. It very intentionally pulls on distorted ideals of strength and power to attain some twisted ideal of perfection that is innately destructive, hateful, and fueled by greed, narcissism, personal grievance, and egotism.
Yep.
Yeah. So, which makes this perfect for an organization of cruel tyrants and despots who wield the dark side and therefore are meant to narratively embody everything that is pure evil.
I'm sorry, are we talking about the Republicans in the United States right now?
Well, we're not talking about...
We're not talking about them.
We're not talking about the rise of fascism in America right now.
What?
Ugh. Considering, a huge reason the prequel trilogy was written was to warn against the rise of fascism in America.
Yeah, there have been a lot of warnings.
Yeah.
Too bad people didn't listen.
No. At least not enough people.
Right.
Again, Star Wars isn't political, bro.
Yeah.
Now,
Hey.
as I mentioned a moment ago, most of the Sith were killed off. That happened about 1,000 years ago. Most of them were killed off by one of their own.
Yeah.
A Sith Lord named Darth Bane.
Bane. Nice.
And of course, Darth is just a Sith title that means Dark Lord.
Okay.
Bane wanted to reform the Sith because he found that the constant backstabbing and instability made it really difficult to actually be a large organization that could challenge the Jedi.
Right.
So instead, he masterminded a situation in which the entire rest of the Sith Order ended up dying while facing off against the Jedi during the 7th Battle of Ruusan at the end of the New Sith War. The exact details of this get a little hazy because a lot of it comes from books and comics that are now considered legends. Like they were decanonized when Disney bought Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But a lot of these things have also been referenced in current canon as being things that happened. So the details are fuzzy and vague, but
Right.
some of these things still happened.
Like Shakespeare writing about kings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like-
It's like, yeah, it probably happened, but did it happen like that?
We're not too sure anymore.
Yeah.
But he would reform himself as the lone remaining Sith and somebody he finds to be his apprentice, creating what is infamously known as the Rule of Two, in which, in his own words, there are no other Sith. There never will be except for us, one master and one apprentice, one to embody the power, the other to crave it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's a good line.
It is a good line. And it's from the 2007 novel Darth Bane, Rule of Two, which again is no longer canonical, but I'm comfortable quoting from it because...
Right. It clearly influences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, in season 6 of the animated Star Wars TV show The Clone Wars, Master Yoda himself mentions, oh yeah, Darth Bane, who created the Rule of Two. Like, okay, they know
Disney
about
make
it.
a choice.
Right. The establishment of the Rule of Two puts the Sith into hiding for the next 1,000 years, while they scheme in the shadows and make plans upon plans upon plans.
Well, so is that Bane and his apprentice, or like the cycle of Bane, apprentice becomes master, gets a new apprentice, but there's only ever two?
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. The prime way that Sith die, as far as I'm aware, for the next 1,000 years.
Being killed by their apprentice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Part of the idea is, oh yeah, if you're powerful enough to kill me, then yeah, you deserve it.
Right.
But I'm going to prevent you as much as I can and try to stop you because I still want to be
Alive.
the tyrant in charge. Right.
Yeah.
So the Sith kind of become rumor for the next 1,000 years. And oddly enough, the fall of the Sith coincides with the collapse of the old Republic,
Okay.
the first Galactic Republic.
So you're going to have a timeline for me to put up on the website, right?
I'll try.
Great.
Yep. Without the Sith to pose a public threat, the Jedi assist in the creation and stewardship of a new Galactic Republic, and this is the Republic that we see 1,000 years later in the prequel trilogy.
Okay.
And the High Republic novels. That's all this new Galactic Republic.
Got it.
And the Jedi spent 1,000 years acting as allies to the Republic, assisting when and where they could, because they believed in the mission of the Republic as a vehicle to help as many people as possible and connect those people with others who can support each other.
Okay.
At some point, again, it's a little unclear because of legends versus canon, the Jedi made their temple on Coruscant the center of their power, where the Council sits, in conjunction with the Republic, which also uses the planet Coruscant as its capital.
Okay.
Basically a giant city that is a planet.
Cool.
Yeah. The Jedi and Republic both faced innumerable challenges and foes over their existence. The Jedi had multiple wars with the Sith before the Sith, apparently died out.
Right.
They also had multiple wars with the Mandalorians. For the casual viewer, Boba Fett.
Got it. Is there a TV show too?
There is a TV show called The Mandalorian. That guy, the people he interacts with wearing similar armor,
Yeah.
Mandalorians. Kind of the joke with them is that weapons are their religion.
Okay.
Very war-focused.
Yeah.
But it's not necessary to get into their whole deal. But in both Legends and canon, the Mandalorians give the Jedi a run for their money.
Okay.
But they do face multiple wars. The High Republic era novels and comics, which have two storylines, 350 and 200 years ago, both deal with threats that I really enjoy reading about. A spoiler warning for some of the broad strokes of this era of Star Wars.
Yeah. And again, this is before the prequels, which is therefore before the original 3 that we all know. Yeah.
One timeline of these books deals with a cult that is obsessed with killing Jedi, and the other is focused on a group of marauders that have a similar hatred for the Jedi and the Republic. Both of these groups end up getting their hands on a brood of beasts from a remote planet. These beasts actually have the power to suck the Force from anyone who is Force sensitive.
Good.
Which of course means a horrifying death.
Yep.
And these two organizations do try to use them to take down the Jedi, and one of them in particular really aims to hurt the Republic as well.
Well, because everybody has the Force in them. It's just whether or not you're Force sensitive that makes you a Jedi or whatever.
Right.
So they can kill everybody.
Oh, definitely. But they generally only actually hunt Jedi or other Force users because they get a better meal that way. Because they are more full of Force, I guess you could say.
Sure.
Which, side note, because you pointed it out, yes, everyone has the Force in some extent. It flows through all of us.
Right.
There are interpretations of the Force throughout some of the stories that do point out that, no, with enough training and determination, even someone who's not Force sensitive can use the Force and could become a Jedi.
Yeah.
It's just not common.
Sure.
Because usually they look for somebody who's got some natural innate talent that then they can hone. But discipline is in itself a valuable skill.
Right.
Oh, anywho, because we have seen enough Star Wars stories take place long after these events, or at least we know that these events, are in the past. We know that the Jedi Order and Republic are still alive and well by the time of the prequel trilogy. So ultimately, those groups with their beasts are unsuccessful.
Yep.
But a lot of wonderful characters die along the way.
Of
And,
course.
I'm a sucker for tragedy. So I eat it up. I love it. Anywho, my point about bringing up these past threats to the Jedi and Republic is that during the High Republic, we begin to see a couple of loose threads that I want to pull on. Specifically, the Jedi Council occasionally makes decisions that are a little bit self-serving.
What?
And the first incident with these so-called Force Eaters, as they're sometimes referred.
They're vampires.
Yeah. That incident ended with Master Yoda and Master Charil Roy agreeing to ensure that no mention of these creatures which pose such a great threat to the Jedi ever makes its way into the archives, any official report, or, of course, any communication to the Republic Senate.
Right.
Right?
If you don't know about it, you can't use it against us in the future.
Exactly.
Yep. We don't have bombs.
No.
There are no such thing as nuclear bombs. Those don't exist.
Right.
No.
Well, and of course, if anything were to happen to the Jedi, how many people would suffer because the Jedi are constantly working to help small farming communities or fend off marauders or keep various people safe throughout.
So really it's to protect others, not ourselves.
Right. You can see where the logic, the justification very quickly starts to...
So are Yoda and Dumbledore similar?
God damn it.
Where you think they're these great mentors and leaders and magic users or whatever, and then you come to find out by the end, oh, actually, they've done some really shitty things.
A bit, yeah.
Cool.
I mean, again, I love Yoda.
Yes.
There are many things about Yoda to love, but he's been on the Jedi Council for 800 years by the time the Republic falls and the Empire takes over.
Jeez.
So he's had 800 years of influence over what the Jedi Order is.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying he's solely responsible in any measure.
Right.
But he's not responsible.
Right.
So ultimately, though, this doesn't also actually prevent the creatures from never being rediscovered. Because that's the other thing is, if nobody knows about them, nobody can go find them again.
Uh-huh.
No, people find them again. It really just makes sure that the Jedi don't even know that these things exist, and they're then ill-prepared to fight
themselves.
back.
Yeah, exactly.
So when these things do reappear, a lot of Jedi die before anyone realizes what the hell's going on.
Right, because they don't even know.
Right. God, I mean, and at that point, then Yoda shows back up after a couple of years-long sabbatical, which, did you know the Jedi could take a sabbatical from the Council?
No.
Yeah. He shows back up with a vaguely unhelpful... Oh yeah, we've seen this before, but we'll figure this out eventually, I'm sure. Sorry. Seen these before? We have. Figure this out eventually. We shall.
Oh, good. Very good.
Yes. I think this is a great prime example of that kind of hubris.
Yeah.
And self-preservation, that they're so unused to facing actual threats that they would rather pretend those threats don't exist.
Sure.
And I think this goes hand in hand with, there is a general weakening of the Jedi over time, as a whole.
Yeah.
And their unwillingness to acknowledge it is a big problem.
It's almost like you have to adapt or die.
Weird.
Anywho.
One of the reasons that is sometimes stated for why the Jedi may have diminished a bit in power is that they built their temple on Coruscant on the ancient ruins of a Sith temple.
Oh, good.
Which...
Did they purify it first?
Well, I think that was part of the intention with why they built the temple there, because, you gotta clear up the dark and fetid influence the dark side from that spot, because generations of Jedi are trained explicitly in the light side of the Force on these very grounds. But...
He's literally called Insidious, people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's...
Okay.
There is a bit of a degrading effect on the Jedi.
Uh-huh.
So as an example, just in terms of Jedi power.
Yeah.
And this is a unique example, of course, in The Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule, the opening book to the High Republic.
Okay.
An entire star system is at one point threatened by a volatile explosive, huge, approaching a star in an uncontrolled speed and trajectory.
Good.
So the entire system is in danger.
Yeah.
Jedi Master Avar Kriss is able to meditate in such a way as to psychically connect thousands of Jedi at once in a combined effort to move the object away from the star and prevent the death of billions.
Okay.
And I think this is specifically done as the opening of the High Republic to show us the Jedi at the height of their power.
Sure.
Meanwhile, by the time of the prequel trilogy, a plot to create an army of hundreds of thousands of clones went completely unnoticed by the Jedi. Until they were notified that, hey, the army's ready. Hey, that army you ordered, it's ready. And they're sitting there going, we didn't order an army. What do you mean?
Oh, God.
What do you mean? So much so that Jedi Masters Mace Windu and Yoda have a conversation in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, where Yoda says, blind we are. If creation of this clone army we could not see.
Yeah.
Mace Windu responds, quote, I think it is time we inform the Senate that our ability to use the Force is diminished.
Oh, no.
But Yoda, acting again out of self-preservation, advises against it, admitting that, well, we can't look weak and invite potential enemies to view us as a valid target. I've also mentioned...
This is why we don't let the old people make decisions for us.
No, well, again, he's so set in his ways and ensure that, we'll be fine, we just got to push through this.
Right.
We'll figure it out. Yes, we have threats, but we'll figure it out. I'm sure. We don't need to notify anybody of any
anything.
Change in anything.
Right. It's all good.
Right. Also, for the record, Palpatine being hidden from the Jedi is explained in canon as him using an explicitly Sith technique called Force cloaking.
Okay.
That, yeah, it's just whatever writer came up with it going, how did the Jedi not notice they were constantly talking to a senator and chancellor who is a Sith? Sure, here's a Sith ability that he can cloak himself in the Force. Sure. People like to get weird about that. There is an explanation. I agree it's a weird and kind of silly explanation. But
somebody pointed out the plot hole too late.
Right. But somebody did eventually come up with a patch for it.
Right.
It's not a great patch. There's still some holes in the code, but whatever. Now, I've also mentioned that the Jedi worked as allies to the Republic, and that for tens of thousands of years, even before the supposed end of the Sith and the transition from the First Galactic Republic to this Galactic Republic, that has been true. But even as far back as 350 years ago in the High Republic novels, there's a lot of the general public that considers the Jedi and Republic to be much closer than mere allies, and often people are confused when they're told that, no, the Jedi don't serve the Republic. We just work alongside them. Right.
Yeah.
And, I mean, generally, I think the Jedi...
There's a separation between church and state. What are you talking about?
Right. And I'm sure many of them believe this to be accurate.
Right.
And in fact, sometimes they do act independently of each other. But they work together so often they become very closely entangled.
Yeah.
And the rest of the galaxy sees that as an implicit, oh no, they are kind of one and the same.
Right.
There is a small but crucial moment, I think. I think this occurs towards the end of the Light of the Jedi novel, 200 years ago, where the Jedi Council holds a vote on whether or not to act as military reinforcements to aid the Republic Defense Coalition forces that are going to deal with a large fleet of marauders.
Okay.
These same marauders that
have the beasts. Sure.
And also, part of the reason these marauders are so dangerous is because they found a unique way to pose a threat to the Republic's trade shipping lanes.
Cool.
So, weird that shipping lanes are a thing again to be concerned about. Anywho, this vote as to whether or not they should participate in a military effort is almost perfectly split. But because Yoda's absent on sabbatical...
It's always Yoda, man.
His stand-in on the council says, you know what? I'm going to cast my vote in Yoda's absence. We should join the Republic in this expressly military operation. Because how can we say we protect the people if this group that is causing such chaos in the shipping lanes...
You just do it as an ally, not as working under them.
Right.
That's how.
Right. Again, I would agree. But just barely enough council members did not, even at that point.
So this is another example of some of the degradation in the Jedi power because they're, not like their own organization anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to treat violence as a last resort only, and seeking to destroy any living being, even objectively horrible people, is against the Jedi Code. Right. Unless it's in defense of oneself or others. But directly no, this is the only...
This is the only option.
Right.
I can't just knock them out and walk away.
Right.
Yeah.
No, they attack a helpless person. Obviously, I'm going to try to stop them. And if they die in that fight, that's awful, but okay, that's how it happened.
Right.
Never attacking, always defending.
Okay.
And I think this is the beginning of the crux of the issue of, at least insofar as the Jedi, a religious organization focused on being noble wandering knights, protecting people, are too willing to align themselves too often with a government that is sometimes acting contrary to their code.
Mm-hmm.
Worse yet, by the time we see the Jedi and Republic during the prequel era, we see how rife the Republic has become with corporate corruption and how readily the Jedi excuse that as simply being part of an imperfect system which seeks to do good.
As somebody who just started my graduate level economics class, it's a little triggering.
Yeah, that's fair. Now, this 13-year period that is the prequel period, that is a lead up to the creation of the Empire,
right?
We see some fantastic, and if I'm being honest, kind of ham-fisted sometimes, representations of corruption in the Galactic Senate.
Yeah.
Right? You have major corporations with seats on the Senate.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Which totally isn't meant to directly critique how many American politicians can easily be described as corporate-owned because they transparently serve their own interests and make
And they
policy
can buy stock in companies.
Right, and there's no protections really against lobbyists becoming politicians and politicians becoming lobbyists for the very industries which fill their pockets.
I'm sorry, who's the president of the United States right now?
Ugh.
Yep. Anyway, so
Yeah.
corporate corruption in the Galactic Senate.
So there are several examples. I'm going to get into a couple of them
Okay.
as they become relevant. The first, and one of the ones that gets pointed out very often, is Newt Gunray. Do you have any guess where Newt Gunray's name comes from?
I'm going to make a wild assumption that he makes guns.
Actually, no. No, this is a reference to a real-life politician.
Oh, Gingrich?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, there is a second politician, though. Gunray? Gunray. Ray Gun. Reagan. Reagan. Now, the choice to make Reagan's name part of Newt Gunray was, as far as I'm aware, only because Reagan created a strategic defense initiative called the Star Wars Project, but he did so without George Lucas's permission.
Yep. Well, and it was also theoretical and used to scare people not actually created. There was nothing that was actually physically made
for
the Star Wars initiative.
It was just bluff and bluster and a fear tactic that didn't really do
what it wanted to.
No. Yeah. But
Reagan, ineffectual?
What? Oh, God. Newt Gingrich, though, was chosen as inspiration for the first name, specifically because of Gingrich's influential role in the 1994 Republican Revolution and his writing of the Contract with America that made a variety of promises of what the party would seek to do if the congressional election went their way.
Gross.
And of course, some of the criticisms for the Contract for America, we don't have time to get into all of them, of course, being the negative ramifications that it posed to especially poor, working class, women, people of color, and the damage that it could do to one's ability to receive higher education, the damage done to those on welfare and otherwise in need of governmental assistance.
So it's like the pre-Project 2025.
Yeah, it's one of the stepping stones towards that. Yeah. Now, in Star Wars, Newt Gunray conspires with Darth Sidious to enrich himself at the expense of the planet Naboo.
Uh-huh.
So, Sheev Palpatine, yes, his first name is Sheev, at this point was just a senator from Naboo. Who was himself responsible for a policy package that implemented taxes on previously free trade routes. Oh, hey, trade routes again. And of course, that's a detriment to the profit margins of the Trade Federation that Newt Gunray is the head of. So Palpatine's secret alter ego, Darth Sidious, convinced Newt Gunray, hey, go invade Naboo and protest. Just go invade the planet of that guy who said he'd tax your trade routes. It definitely doesn't involve me in any major way. And of course, the invasion of Naboo ultimately fails because of Jedi intervention, but it did generate a lot of public support and sympathy for then Senator Palpatine.
Because his planet got invaded.
Right. Making his election to the office of Chancellor a much more easily secured win.
Sure.
Side note, Newt Gunray would face 4 trials in front of the Republic's Supreme Court and eventually be found not guilty, and therefore allowed to keep his titles and assets. Yeah, he's rich. So what if he instigated an invasion? It's fine. It's fine.
Fine. He didn't like taxes, so it's okay.
Yeah. It's about taxation, guys.
Right.
Chill. This rise in political station, of course, makes it much easier for Palpatine to manufacture the separatist crisis with the aid of his apprentice, Count Dooku.
Okay.
Now, reminder that Count Dooku was once a Jedi who left the Order following the death of his apprentice, Qui-Gon Jinn. Yes, Qui-Gon, who was Obi-Wan's master.
Right.
So, after Qui-Gon dies, Dooku, who is already a bit disillusioned with the Jedi, leaves and ends up joining Sidious as a Sith.
Yeah.
But in public, Dooku became the face of a rallying cry for planets who wanted to secede from the Republic explicitly because of rampant corruption within the Republic. Thousands of star systems eventually form a new confederacy of independent systems and make Dooku, again, a respected former Jedi, head of their parliament. Of course, they also get a bunch of megacorporations to join because, well, they need money.
Of course.
Which Dooku got them to join with a promise of reduced regulations. And naturally, all of this is a ruse by the Sith to start a war.
Right.
The Jedi are initially brought on by the Republic as advisors on the issue of planet seceding, but upon learning directly from Dooku that there are supposedly Sith involved, they become immediately far too willing to participate more actively in what does develop into a full-scale war.
And it's choosing violence again, so we've got that crack continuing to spread in the Jedi Order.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They took a crack, shoved a wedge in there, and hit it with a hammer. Repeatedly.
Yeah.
I think part of the stroke of genius with this war, though, is in the armies that are chosen are kind of perfect for the Jedi specifically. Because the droid army that the Separatists use give the Jedi no moral quandary about killing enemy combatants.
Right, because droids aren't alive.
Right. They can simply dismantle an endless stream of unthinking, non-sentient machines, and this is crucial in ensuring that the Jedi would be amenable to being put in charge of military operation against these armies, making sure that, well, they're never really going to have to do any actual killing. And it also does help that Dooku and Palpatine made sure that the Separatist military commanders that they prop up are some of the most obviously mustache-twirlingly evil people in existence. I'm talking military generals who are happy to use civilians as shields.
Good.
Starve out civilian populations to force their leaders to comply.
We don't do that.
Right, and torture anyone and everyone to get every bit of information. All of which, by the way, are war crimes.
Says who?
Well, says the Geneva Conventions and The Hague, so I'm still going to call them war crimes.
Okay.
So, again, even if the Jedi do have to face a living opponent, they can just pat themselves on the back for defeating an unusually horrid person.
Right.
Right. Usually capturing them, sending them to prison. The Jedi not only agree to join in a military operation here with the Republic, but are actually made into generals of the Grand Army of the Republic.
Good. And remind me, prequels? This is the prequels?
Yes. This is all prequels, like Attack of the Clones.
Yes. So Anakin Skywalker era.
Yes.
Yes.
The Jedi allowed themselves to be maneuvered into a situation where any pretense that they don't serve as a military arm of the Republic, totally gone.
Right.
Out the window. It's very difficult to...
If you're generals of their army, you are directly...
Right.
A part of them, right?
Right. And this change is noticed by the people of the galaxy who begin to more and more see the Jedi as aggressors in the war.
Right.
And public opinion turns on the Jedi because, of course it would.
Right. Aren't you supposed to be peaceful?
Right.
Aren't you supposed to not be aggressive towards people or violent unless absolutely called upon?
Right.
This doesn't count as absolutely called upon.
You're supposed to be protectors, not soldiers.
Right.
My favorite moment showing this particular turn in public opinion, or at least how Palpatine encourages this, is from the Clone Wars TV show, Season 2, Episode 11, Lightsaber Lost. There is a line that most people would be forgiven for missing. While Ahsoka Tano is chasing a thief through the streets of Coruscant, you can see Chancellor Palpatine giving a speech on a billboard.
Okay.
At about the 14.5-minute mark, you can hear Palpatine giving a speech saying, quote, "I have no doubt that the Jedi are doing their very best to ensure the safety of every citizen in the Republic. The accusation that the Jedi created the Clone War to give themselves more power over the government is absurd, and I will not stand for it."
Oh my God.
End quote. Right. He's either outright creating these rumors in real time, or he's taking some rumor that he saw was gaining traction and making it mainstream by acknowledging its existence. Even if, ostensibly he's denying the validity, he's still laying the groundwork for, at the end of the war, being able to...
DEI actually hurts companies.
Jesus Christ.
Didn't you know that?
It is very much that same...
vibe.
That same vibe.
Yeah.
Of just, well, you just say shit over and over again, and then later, you can make some grand reveal that proves it was true the whole time, even when, no, obviously that's not what's going on. But now you have a bunch of people believing it because, well, they heard rumors that already supported that idea years ago.
Yeah.
So they've got some reinforcement bias. And this particular moment in the show has always, in my mind, been a very not subtle dig at highly propagandist, quote-unquote, news networks that know damn well they're misleading people.
You know who you are.
Oh, yes. They're only one vowel sound away from what they do to the news. But just couch their misinformation in denials.
Right.
Yeah. Especially at the time that the prequels were initially being written, right? Very like early 2000s.
Yeah.
Very on the nose. Meanwhile, the clone army fighting alongside them allows the Jedi to maintain a sense of compassion in the everyday of the war by ensuring that, well, they'll build camaraderie and friendship with these soldiers, which also makes it all the more unthinkable and shocking when the war ends with Palpatine using Order 66 to activate a hidden biochip implanted in the brains of every clone in the earliest stages of embryonic development, ensuring that they would basically become a sleeper agent.
Oh, good.
Without, their own knowledge or will, that they would turn on
their
Jedi friends and commanders.
Yeah.
Yeah, they became friends by nature of enduring years of war together, so they were easily blindsided. And also, that biochip in the brain thing, it was actually a big retcon that came from the Clone Wars TV show. It wasn't really a thing in the prequel movies so much.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I didn't remember that.
No.
Yeah, because I've never seen the TV shows. I've just seen the movies.
Right. But a lot of people have always felt it kind of odd that the Jedi wouldn't sense that the clones' motives don't line up with their actions.
Sure.
So
even if their senses are not as strong as they used to be, they should have been able to still sense that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the biochips were kind of brought in as an explanation eventually to go, hey, it wasn't even the clones' fault either. And they're also victims here.
Right.
Because after years of developing friendships with these people and clones outright saying, yeah, I don't even know what the point of this war is. And like, what do we do afterwards? Our whole purpose, we were born and bred for this war. What do we do afterwards?
Yeah. Which is also a direct hit on like the eugenics.
Oh, yeah.
Stuff of like, if you're creating a person with, specifics and, detailed specifications or whatever, like how much are they their own person? What's their fate and,
right. And like
self-determination.
Right. Because that's very morally hinky.
Right.
But also pulling on the, how America treats its veterans has always been a problem.
Yes.
And
yes, it has.
A lot of people ending up after a war going, hey, what was the point and why are we being treated like this afterwards?
Right.
So, yeah, big retcon at the time. But, side note. So the Kaminoans, who are the people responsible for the creation of the clones, they get Senate representation almost immediately by leveraging the fact that they created this army.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
So, right, the arms contractor has to get a seat in the Senate.
Yeah.
Naturally, the senator for Kamino has a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that the war continues as long as possible.
Yep.
To make sure that the Republic keeps buying clones from Kamino, and they worked alongside multiple other military interest groups in the Senate towards this end. This Kaminoan senator is named Halle Bertoni.
Good.
Halle Bertoni, of course, being a dig at the American oil company, Halliburton. And specifically the fact that Dick Cheney went from being Secretary of Defense under President George H.W. Bush to then become CEO of the oil company Halliburton from 1995 to 2000, until he was chosen to become Vice President under George W. Bush.
Yeah. And there were some hinky things about oil around that time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the classic jokes about the Iraq War is that America really just got it so we could grab Iraq's oil.
Right.
And oil from Afghanistan. And Halliburton has come under fire so many times, and so deservedly, for making large profits off of the Iraq War.
Yeah.
To, again, briefly quote a 2003 NPR article titled Examining Halliburton's Sweetheart Deal in Iraq. Quote, the Iraq contracts are cost plus. The government reimburses the company for its costs, then adds on a profit of 2 to 7%.
Jeez.
Critics say this creates a perverse incentive. The more you spend, the more you make. The Pentagon says this type of flexible contract is necessary in a war zone. End quote. Yeah. Star Wars has never been shy about criticizing the American government, and
good.
I love that.
Yep.
But I also love when that comes in the form of a character whose name is just the silliest, most obvious political joke. Hallie Bertoni.
Yep. It's satire, Judge.
Yeah.
We can't be sued for that.
Now, obviously, anyone who watched the original trilogy or knows much about it knows that the Empire eventually gains power. Palpatine is the Emperor, while the Jedi become an almost instantly nothing more than legend.
Right.
So, narratively, it must follow that a story opening with tons of Jedi, there must be a horrible fate awaiting them.
Right.
To paraphrase Kanan Jarrus from Season 2, Episode 1 of Star Wars Rebels, there were 10,000, or nearly 10,000 Jedi Knights across the galaxy when the Great Jedi Purge occurred.
Ooh.
Yes.
Purges are never good.
No. Well, and that is what it's referred to.
Yeah.
Is the Great Jedi Purge. Now, largely I would posit that the in-universe and narrative reason for this particular plot being successful where others were not, honestly has a lot to do with the institutionalization of the Jedi and the normalization of corruption in the Republic alongside their growing hubris.
Yeah.
Right? And most of which was happening long before Palpatine began plotting anything at all.
Sure.
He just saw that the groundwork was laid and went, I got this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have a supposedly independent religious organization who becomes less and less independent over time, making it harder and harder for them to actually criticize the Republic when it needs criticizing.
Right.
Not to mention that by the time we get to the prequels, the Jedi are so synonymous with the Republic, they can't really operate outside the Republic without drawing ire from the local populaces who are worried that the Jedi's presence means the Republic is coming or they'll try to make us join the Republic. Mm-hmm. And there are arguments to be made that, yeah, the Jedi are trying to limit their power and make sure that they don't engage in the slippery slope of running around telling everyone how to do what their version of good is.
You know, colonialism, that thing?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I can understand. Okay, you gotta give yourself some limits. And that is a valid reason to, stay neutral in most conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's why historically they tried to act as often as possible as mediators, negotiators, and acting to de-escalate situations.
Right.
Right. Either way, they allowed themselves to become an arm of the state without ever actually acknowledging that that's what was happening. Mm-hmm. And in so doing, allowed themselves to be distracted and pulled away from their own teachings by participating in a war that devastated the galaxy.
Yeah.
They became complacent and complicit.
So what happened during the Purge?
Oh, the Purge?
Yeah.
Was Order 66.
Oh, okay.
The Purge was Palpatine calling up all of the clone commanders.
Right, okay.
And going, hey, I know you don't know about this biochip in your head, but you're going to find out.
Yep.
You will now execute your Jedi commander.
And so then by the time we get to the original trilogy, there's just a handful of Jedi left, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I will say, sometimes I see people complain that new stories occasionally invent new Jedi who survived. Mm. But with 10,000 Jedi,
right?
Again, assuming Kanan Jarrus was accurate in his estimation, even a 99.9% successful genocide is going to lead to at least 100 Jedi surviving.
Right.
So...
And then if they find apprentices and whatever, there might be a couple more.
Right.
Yeah.
So the fact that there are even a dozen or so
there could be hermit Jedis living on other planets that weren't even a part of the war.
Right. And there are some stories here and there that have shown, okay, some younglings managed to escape, some of the children managed to get out because people worked hard to help at least somebody escape.
Right.
And that there actually is specifically a path for people who are force sensitive to hide from the Empire during its reign. Mm. Because the Empire does really try to eradicate any force-sensitive individuals. Make sure that no Jedi could ever...
They don't even want force-sensitive people on their team?
Well, they do form something called the Inquisition, which is
I wonder where it got its inspiration from.
The Inquisitors are mostly fallen Jedi, Like people who survived and were tortured by Vader
Eeh.
until they were willing to do horrible things because he's like, all right, well, you're going to go do some of my dirty work for me because I can't be everywhere at once. And Vader is himself the fist of the Emperor going wherever the Emperor really needs a crackdown. Yeah, the Inquisition is horrifying. And the fact that even a few Jedi do turn to the dark in the face of, torment and horror and pain is awful.
Yeah.
But what's even worse is, I think, how many other Jedi they do end up killing.
Yeah.
And non-Jedi who are just people who have the Force.
Right.
Ultimately, I think Star Wars does a great job at tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Star Wars is at its best when it's doing tragedy or when it's doing a story about the people rising up against the tyrannical, corrupt government.
Right.
Because
which inherently involves tragedy.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And in both cases, it's very much about hope.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cliche, both in Star Wars and about Star Wars, to say how much it's about hope.
Mm-hmm. So then, do you consider the Purge and Order 66 to be the real fall of the Jedi?
Basically, yes.
Okay.
Like that is the official effective end date of the Jedi having any kind of real galactic influence.
Right.
So that is what I'm marking
because there
as
are still Jedis, obviously, because we see them in the movies that happen after the prequel.
Mm-hmm.
But they're like individuals that occasionally meet up and work with each other, but for the most part are like the stragglers.
Right.
They're left behind.
They're keeping the religion alive in what way they can, but the organization is toast. Dunzo, gone. Granted, I am really interested to see with the new upcoming Rey movies if they will do more of the rebuilding of the Order.
Mm-hmm.
Because the sequel trilogies mentioned that, Luke tried to kind of restart the Order for a bit. They were met with more tragedy, and because it was just him and whatever kids he had gathered to try to train, there was a very small effort, and it fizzles out quick.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to see the next story, because the Jedi are legendary, even with their flaws.
Right.
And again, most of them individually are trying to do their best, are trying to help people as much as possible.
Sure. But it's an important representation of like humanity.
Oh yeah.
Like you can always work for an ideal, but you're never going to get there.
No. And I think some of the Jedi that embody that best are the ones who acknowledge that directly.
Yeah.
Anywho, unless you have any other additional questions, which I'd always happy to dig into.
I don't think so.
Okay. I think we'll call it there for now then. And
alrighty.
Hopefully I'll end up getting into more Star Wars topics eventually, because there are so many
things. And I will
be
getting into Star Trek.
Yes. There are so many little threads I want to pull on with Star Wars. It's just
there's
each in their
so
time.
much content for it too.
Oh my gods.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just like Star Trek. They're both, there's a reason they're as old and as long surviving as they are, as multiple series and movies and reincarnations and whatever,
And just the self-referential nature of storytelling means that, they reference themselves and each other a lot.
Yep.
I mean, hell, George Lucas, I think, has said multiple times that Star Wars could never have existed if Star Trek didn't.
Right.
So, no, I'm always excited for that, because I keep meaning to get more into Star Trek too.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a little bit here and there at times.
I'll admit, I am particularly biased to Next Generation.
Oh, sure.
It's my comfort watch.
Gotta love Picard.
Yeah. Patrick Stewart is life.
Anywho.
Cool. That's a wrap on episode 14, Fall of the Jedi. If you'd like to delve further into this topic, our research sources and related images are posted on our website, hyperfixation-investigations.com. Again, that's hyperfixation-investigations.com. Thanks so much for listening.
Follow us on social media for updates, and check out our Patreon to support us directly. Join our Discord community and receive other special perks.
See you next week, and remember, what's a little info dumping between friends?
If you'll indulge me for a moment, thinking about Star Wars and specifically the eventual joyous moment that is the fall of the Galactic Empire always brings to mind one of my favorite poems, Ozymandias, because of how much it pulls on the idea that, yes, entropy comes for us all, but specifically because, in my mind, it has always been a reminder and warning to tyrants that their legacy will only ever be remembered with disdain at best, if they are remembered at all. So if you don't mind, I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well these passions read, which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them, and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appeared. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away.